I will.
When they come over to visit, I give them money. I need some stuff to take. So this time I gave it to you.
I'm trying to get Josh to do a run with me in February. It's only a 5K, so it's not like super hard, but it's at the Whitewater Center. And it's a running plunge, so at the very end you jump into the jump.
We went to the Whitewater Center to ice.
It's so pretty over there, isn't it?
And the lighted trails.
It's
But the
beautiful.
bridge you walk on is not bad.
The suspension, oh, everybody jumps on it. I feel like I'm about to fall off.
I feel like it's gonna blow up. A lot of fun. And next time direct me about it. It's hard to remember. I've even tried it.
Oh, goodness.
What were you saying about the YMCA? Is that
Yeah.
hey, well, I'm not good. Excuse me, I'm a mouthful of Tic Tac.
You're good.
This is Jerry. So,
I'm just
y'all know
convinced
each
that
other for a while?
Yep.
this is Hannah's world. I'm just looking at it.
Yep. He's one of our gym
I ain't
buddies.
nothing to
We
say.
see him
She went out
almost
and
every
boom,
night.
boom.
Well, I hate it before though, they would take my
Yeah.
I've been there.
He came to the Christmas dinner and he's come for some Airy White singings and he's come here a couple times.
I knew your face was familiar. Well, it's good to know.
We don't see it a while. We usually go down to the rec.
The rec, yeah.
Yeah.
The rec center, yeah. Yeah, the rec center's actually, we could see it from our house, this road curves around.
Uh-huh. That's handy to have it right there.
A lot, we love it. But the lady that teaches cheerleading, the rec center also has a class in life. Linda Ortiz. So anyway, you know,
Yeah.
Jerry likes to
Yep.
he goes 6 days a week.
Jerry.
Well, not this week.
Up in iron. Let's go.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
He does appreciate it.
He's better at it than me. I only go maybe four days a week.
Most weeks it's 6 days. Sometimes it's just 5. Most times he does on Saturday afternoon too.
Wow.
Treadmill and the recumbent,
Recumbent and elliptical bike.
Oh, Elbert loves the treadmill.
Well, Jerry does both of them. He did. So he had.
He runs marathons.
Do you?
Yeah. He's hardcore
You
like
know,
that.
Diana runs Degenhart runs marathons.
Oh, does she really?
Yeah, you need to talk to her. She's getting ready to go for a mall. She only goes.
Oh my.
I talk to her sometimes. I guess she's still running.
Wow.
You know these trips she's taken. She's been climbing the mountains and stuff.
Oh yeah. The elevation change.
Yeah. Talk to her sometime. I don't know if she's still running.
Okay, that's
She gets
awesome.
back from the mall.
Yeah.
Go to her. She's back there.
What's up, David? That's awesome. I'm gonna check in. You good, Dad?
Ready to get at it.
You're rearing and ready to go. Rearing and ready to go.
Knowing you and Josh,
That's why, oh my goodness. We tried running with each other in college just to be healthy, and he acted like it was a race. He just blew me out. I'm like, I just want to gingerly run, you know, it'd be cute like Dave. It's like, no, I want to win. I said, come on. Yeah. Did you bring a black jacket last night? changed into, and then it was hot downstairs, so I didn't even wear it. Yeah, I didn't even take it. Whoops. And you know what? I stole that from the gym I used to work at because we had a plain bucket, a Boston Pound bucket. If those things were in the bucket for 1 week, then we got to take it before we donated it to Goodwill. I got Beats headbands. I got North Face active jackets. It was the best. And Josh was always like, "You stole it from those people." I said, "They had a 1 week limit to figure it out." They had a 1 week limit.
Camp or doing pretty good. They're doing good.
I have a motorcycle. Josh is feeling a little better. Josh
Used to go to camp.
and now he wants his own.
Oh, he wants to go now.
Yes! Oh my goodness, yes.
He told me he took it. It didn't go well.
He does his test tomorrow. He does it again tomorrow. And has he studied for it?
He's gonna try it. He's gonna try to wing it again.
He's got it at like 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, and he's gonna wing it again. It's the same. What's the exact same bike as me? I'm going to invite him. Because he said my bike was bigger. Okay. Is that not? It's a brighter blue. I think he just wants his own. I used to have hair down to my bottom, and I cut it all off. I donated.
I'm cutting mine.
It was for wigs for kids.
You're gonna go bald again?
Yep.
I
Tomorrow.
donated my last time I cut my hair.
Some to your dad, who
Isn't it too dark? I thought you didn't want black
I heard you
hair.
didn't study again.
Huh?
I heard you didn't study again.
For what? Oh, the motorcycle?
Yeah.
Winging it again.
I'll wait. I'm whole cat in.
Well, all right. Well, hello. Hope everyone is having a good new year. One day into it, it's kind of hard to tell how it's going so far, but hopefully not bad, right? Psalm 16, open your Bible. I didn't get very far into it last week. In fact, I didn't even get to ask you guys about your homework, really. How you guys handled some of it. So I want to start by doing that. I want to wrap this up. I'll give you your homework for next week. Your homework next week is Psalm 23, the Shepherd Psalm. So it's an fan favorite, I guess. Most people have a soft spot in their heart for that particular psalm. So we're going to be looking at that. Oddly enough, it's the same kind of psalm as this one, a psalm of confidence. And we're going to be, looking at that. So I believe I did ask how you summarized it, but I don't believe I asked how you summarized the strophes in your homework. So if anyone want to give you the opportunity to just open that up and give me some input here. Let's go ahead and read it again real quick so we have an idea of where we're going from. This is in the CSB. I'm not following the CSB breakdown. I have my own breakdown of this particular psalm, but you can see as we go along. Protect me, God, for I take refuge in you. I said to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have nothing good besides you. As for the holy people who are in the land, they are the noble ones. All my delight is in them. The sorrows of those who take another God for themselves will multiply. I will not pour out their drink offerings of blood, and I will not speak their names with my lips. Lord, you are my portion and my cup of blessing. You hold my future. And I have that particular, and it says, my lot is in your hand. I have that as like a pivot point for this particular psalm. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. I will bless the Lord who counsels me, even at night when my thoughts trouble me. I always let the Lord guide me because he is at my right hand. I will not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad and my whole being rejoices. My body also rests securely, for you will not abandon me to Sheol, nor will you allow your faithful one to see decay. You reveal the path of life to me. In your presence is abundant joy. At your right hand are eternal pleasures. So, if anyone wants to share their homework, feel free to go for it. Let me know how you summarized it, how you broke it down. Don't look at my things and think you have to follow that.
You said they don't have, they don't have to be right.
No, I'm just looking for your thoughts on it.
Okay, all right, that's what I
So,
want.
by the yes, don't feel pressure on yourselves to give the right answer or whatever. I'm just looking for your thoughts on it. It's a thought experiment.
Okay, I'll give my thoughts.
Okay, give me your thoughts.
I had 6 strophes.
Okay.
The first one I have, God is the object of his trust. He takes refuge in him. The second, his happiness is only in God, and he finds pleasure in the saints of God on earth.
Okay.
The third, sorrows follow those that serve other gods. So the three, I can't even read my own mind. Sorrows follow those that serve other gods than the true God, and he will not be united in any way with them in their worship. Number 4, the psalmist worshiped God, therefore he sought no possession or comfort which did not come from him. Number 5, the psalmist felt that God, as his protector, was always near him. Number 6, and I took the supposition that he does believe in death for life, and I put, he felt that even if he died, he would be raised again and be in the presence of God.
Okay. All right. That the way that it's handled in the New Testament and the way that you approach that does affect the way that you handle the breakdowns on this. So if, we'll talk about that in a bit. I want to lay my ideas and case plainly down so we know what I'm saying and we know what I'm not saying when it comes to that particular part. Anybody else have any other, I appreciate that. Anybody else have any other strophes they want to share? Summaries. I know we have others that do it. It's a great time. Even if you only want to just say one, you can just say, hey, this is kind of, I in the whatever strophe, I summarized it like this. Maybe you don't want to give the whole thing. I'm just happy to hear how you think. Josh is sitting there with a whole sheet full of information. Because he keeps looking at me like, it's okay. If you feel the need or the desire to do that as I'm giving mine, then feel free when I'm finished to go ahead and do this. Here's my own breakdowns for this. I broke this into 5 different strophes. I have verses 1 and 2, verses 3 and 4. Basically, there are 4 couplets and then a triplet towards the end. There's like a 3-verse, grouping at the very end in my breakdown. David's confidence in Yahweh's protection, in the Lord's protection. The reason I focus on that particular name is you can't see it because for some weird reason, Logos, my Bible software, when you start building the graphic in it, it converts it all to L lowercase o-r-d. But this first one right here is actually Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, right? So it's the covenant name of God. So David's confidence is in God's protection. He says, I take refuge in you. You are my entirety. The second one, in verses 3 and 4, you see David's delight is in the faithfulness of Israel versus the world. And you see this sort of contrast between, those who, you see the idea of joy is delight here. But you see this contrast between those who take on another God versus the holy people of God. Those who take on another God is set in contrast to the holy people of God in this sort of grouping here. So, one is a source of pride as the king, as someone who is leading his nation in the ways of God, to know that the nation is walking after him is a sign of joy. It's a sign of success for the king. But you see this put in contrast to the sorrow. Joy and sorrow is put in contrast here. And one is, obviously, there's righteousness in one aspect, and the other one, you see this idea of point out their drink offerings of blood. And there's been some question as to whether or not is that referring to sacrifices. Certainly there was certain Canaanite gods that they practiced human sacrifice to, not the Israelites in David's time, but certainly following David, some of the Manasseh in the southern kingdom of Judah sacrificed some of his sons to Moloch. So are they talking about that, or is that just a picture of any kind? I am opposed to and will have no part with pagan practices. That's the position that I tend to take in this. This stands for the entirety of the pagan sort of religious economy, if you will. Then you see the third strophe, David's portion and inheritance is Yahweh. Again, you can't really see it on my text here, but that is the Tetragrammaton, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the covenant name of God. The Lord is my portion, my cup, and my blessing. You hold my lot, you hold my future. And I mentioned last week in passing, and we'll talk about it a little more here, 5 and 6, this is the image of God finding hope and comfort resting in the knowledge that God holds his future. This is a picture simultaneously of his providential care. It's spoken of in terms of the land being divided up. But he's saying that he's speaking of the idea that his providence is I trust in him, his providence is good. Ultimately is the picture that we see here. My portion, my inheritance is with Yahweh. And this idea of him holding his future, I see that as the central pivot point of this particular psalm. The fourth strophe, verses 7 and 8, I have David's willingness. And that says, I will bless the Lord who counsels me, and at night when my thoughts trouble me, I will let the Lord guide me because he is my right hand. I will not be shaken. So it's his willingness to heed, to pay attention to the Lord's will, but also to bless the Lord even in troubling times, because, this again is covenant name of God comes into play here. And, you're talking about even when my thoughts trouble me, I bless the Lord who is with me, who counsels me through his word, as I go about seeking his will. I always let the Lord guide me. So it's a picture of willingness to bless and a willingness to trust in the Lord even in the midst of difficulties, whatever these troubling thoughts might be that are coming to him. And then you go down and you see David's confidence expressed in shocking terms in verses 9 through 11. Now, here is, if you notice these different colors on the side of my psalm here, you see I have wow, it's so much more vivid on my screen. You ought to see the glorious colors on my screen. Oh well, too bad. You have A, B, C, where the pivot point is, B, and A. It's a chiastic structure. It's chiasm. And when you're looking at this, is one of those where it's like, you have. I really wanted to inset these, but I didn't have enough space on the screen to do that. You have think of it like a sandwich or a book. A and A are the outer covers. Then you have B, and then C is the center part of the book where you open it open, and it's, that's where the little stitching is at, and you can tell where the center part of the book is in a saddle stitch book or something like that. That's sort of how this works. A, verses 1 and 2, is David's confident plea, because that's really what he's getting down to. He's confident that the Lord will protect him. He's making a plea. And you combine that with David's confident plea with David's confidence expressed in the last 3 verses. There's a confidence wrapper inside of this. His hope, his confidence. These are all expressed in these outer sections there. In the 2b, you have David's delight and David's willingness. David's delight is in the holy people of the land. My delight is in them. David's willingness is to listen to the God who providentially cares for him, who provides for him, who is worthy of his trust and his hope. And the very center of this particular psalm is this notion that God is the one who holds his future in his hands. You hold my future. And because God holds David's future, he can have confidence in every aspect of life, in every season of life, even in the most shocking and remarkable circumstances that we see spoken of in the last 3 verses of this particular psalm. That's the picture that's what I'm dealing with. That's how I would preach this particular thing. Now, I like to do a series every now and then, and I won't be able to do that while I'm here. But I like to take, the thing is, you can take one passage, I will preach it one way, Steve would have preached it another way. We can all approach a similar passage from different angles, dealing with the same data, and maybe walk away with 2 valid yet different sermons off one set of data. I used to do a series where I would do one passage, 2 lessons, and I would demonstrate this dynamic. Because, it's interesting. What we would do when we were going to, one of the things I noticed this when we were going to school, they would assign us a passage to work on. Like, we're going to be covering this. I want to see you guys write a lesson on this. Okay, we all come back and then we share our lessons with one another because, that way, when you're first getting started, you're getting lessons that you can preach, right? Well, it's funny to see 20 guys writing like almost 15 different lessons on the same text. It's really kind of cool. it just shows the depth that is in there, what personal experience does to when you come to the text to look at what it means versus how you apply it. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and I bring this up because you might look at this and never get that, and that's fine. The text is deep enough here to not violate what David is saying and still have different approaches to it. So that's why I'm not so hung up on, well, am I saying the right thing? Is this the right answer? Is this the right summary? Well, no, I want to hear what you, and this, I think the most liberating thing that we did in school was a psalm diary. We did a psalm diary, and it sounds weird. Oh my God, you're not supposed to, who cares, right? Diaries, psalm diaries. And we got a grade on them at the end of the year. And what you do is you sit down and you read through the Psalms. Day 1, I'm going to read Psalm 1. And then you write a 2 or 3 sentence summary of that psalm. Key points, key thoughts. Next day, Psalm 2, same thing. At the end, you're going to have, yes, you're going to have similar themes when we share the books with each other like that, but you're going to find people picking up on different focal points in the text, maybe because it might resonate with you for some reason. I find that to be kind of an interesting practice. So, like I said, don't feel like this is the only way to do this. I'll give you another example. Mark Futato, in the Cornerstone Bible Commentary, here's how he broke this down. This is a fantastic way to break it down. I looked at this text all up and down one side and down the other. I would not have done it this way. But when I see it, I'm like, wow, I get what you were going with, and it actually fits with the text too. Verses 1 and 2, strophe 1. To trust is to rely on the Lord. And ultimately, that's what David is saying. He's saying, you're my refuge. I'm relying on you. To trust, then, he's putting this all, since this is a psalm of trust or a psalm of confidence, he's putting it through the lens of that particular focal point. To trust is to rely on the Lord. Verses 3 and 4, to trust is to be devoted to the Lord. And he's emphasizing the joy of devotion versus the sadness of ungodliness. Then you go to strophe 3. Oddly enough, he actually follows my strophe breaks. I was like looking at it afterwards. I was like, oh, wow, I must be onto something here, because Futato was fantastic in the Psalms. Verses 5 and 6, to trust is to delight in the Lord. And he is reveling and he is joyfully praising the fact that God is his portion. That God is the one who controls his life. In his providential wisdom, he makes a space for the psalmist in the land. It's a beautiful picture. Verses 7 and 8, to trust is to learn from the Lord. He focuses in on the words, the Lord who counsels me, the Lord who guides me. And we already called out some of those aspects right there in that. And then in verses 9 through 11, he talks about to trust is to rejoice in the Lord. And he goes in and he focuses on this idea, which it begins with rejoicing and it ends with rejoicing. So, yeah, this is an important passage right here. Okay? This is cited by Peter as referring to Jesus Christ as, what's happening? What's going on here? Well, let me tell you, Jesus is the Messiah. It's demonstrated by his resurrection as foretold in Scripture. And that is 100% the final definitive, view and position on that text. Period. Now, David may not have understood it exactly like that. But that's not relevant in the book of Acts in the ultimate fullness of the truth that we have here. So I'll get into more of that in a bit, but the fact of the matter is on the wrapper of this remarkable statement that he makes is the idea of abundant joy, of rejoicing. And to trust in the Lord is to rejoice in the veracity and the power of a God who keeps his promises and cares for his people, who will bring about even the most remarkable for the wellness, for the wholeness of his people. So it's really kind of an interesting picture. I mean, why did Jesus die? As the sin bearer of the world, that he might reconcile man to God, that through his pain and suffering and sacrifice, we would know peace, that we could rejoice in the peace. But if he didn't rise, where's the hope? All right, I mean, you go to 1 Corinthians 15 and you can deal with it. So you can see there's different ways to slice this cake, right? So it's kind of an interesting dynamic when you get into that. Now, here's the things that I want to focus on as we go through this. I started talking about hopefulness last week, and we talked about what hope is. Boy, I'm sorry about that. Hope is trustful expectation, particularly with reference to the fulfillment of God's promises. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty big one right there. Hope is the confidence that what God has done and has promised in the past guarantees our participation in what God will do in the future. That's how they define it in the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary. Hope. It's not situational, it supersedes situation. That's why Jeremiah can sit and think about a devastated Jerusalem and still say, yeah, I'm worn down and I'm despairing, but I call this to mind and I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. Lamentations 3:21-24. So this psalm gives no specifics to tie it to a specific situation in David's life, but it begins with a plea, preserve me, O God, for I take refuge in you. And whether this is just a general statement that he's making after the fact or if he's in the midst of something, it's hard to know. Some say he's struggling with something in this. Others are saying this is just confidence after the storm. He's saying, I've weathered and I can weather it again. You get the idea. So despite the looming difficulties, if they are there, this psalm is filled with a confident trust in the Lord, and therefore he could find reason to hope in even the most dire and extreme circumstances. So let's take a look at some of the images of hope that we find, the vivid statements of hope in this particular psalm. I believe this is about as far as we got last week. We talked about what a refuge was. What is a refuge? How many of you hunt? Do we have hunters? What's a game refuge?
Safe place.
Safe place. Can you go hunting on a game refuge typically? In Oklahoma, you can go hunting on public lands or private lands, but you have to have a special permit and you draw out to hunt on specific game refuges because that is a safe place for, the preservation of the breeding population and things of that nature in a, that particular area right there, so they're not overhunted in that area. They can kind of maintain. They do things in there. It's a safe place. That's the picture that we see here. So it's a safe, refuge is a place of safety from some type of peril. When he says, I'm going to change colors here because I want to. I take refuge in you. He's speaking about the safest of safe places that you can find. The ultimate of security, if you will. You know, I put it in terms last week of storm shelters. What would you rather hide in? Would you rather be in a trailer house, in the hallway with a mattress over you, and I've done that before, or would you rather be in an underground private shelter? See, after Moore was basically wiped off the face of the planet a couple of times, FEMA came out and they gave everybody in Oklahoma who wanted it and was in a high percentage area free storm shelters that they would install and put in. So my sister has one. And I can tell you it's much better to wait out one of those in there than it is to just sort of hang out in your house and hope it doesn't hit, or get in your car and think you're going to drive away from it. We have to do all of that. So he says he's going to seek shelter. He says, I have taken shelter. This is something he's already done. And he finds his joy and his hope in the fact that there is a God that he is able to take shelter from the storms of life and the situations. And that storm shelter is not some hole in the ground. It's not a physical structure that can be destroyed by whatever means. Rather, it is it's the unchanging covenant God of Israel. That is, he says, you are I said to the Lord Yahweh, you are my Lord. That's a different word. One refers to like a king, a sovereign. The other one refers to the covenant name of God, that relational, personal name of God. Take a look at the second picture of hope that you find in this confidence. And I'm going to go down to verse 5 here. And I want to focus on this one that we were talking about earlier, this you hold my future, which I say is the pivot point of this psalm. He can say these things because he knows where his life is held, who has the ultimate reign and control over his life. And he finds that to be a comforting thing. The godless might find that to be something that's fearful, not the psalmist. So when he says, the Lord is my chosen portion and my cup, you hold my lot, that's in the New English translation. Lord, you are my portion and my cup of blessing, you hold my future. It's talking about the blessedness that comes from trusting in the Lord and his providential care of his people. He has made promises. He keeps his promises. And if he holds the lot, if he holds the entirety of your life, that is a good place to be. The chosen portion is an image of sustaining support. A portion of food, a lot that was an allotment representing the allotment from the Lord in the Old Testament at times. Sometimes it was used of the land. This is my portion. You get the idea. The cup imagery is, in this context, could refer to the steadfast love of the Lord, the cup of blessing. And we've been looking at the idea of wine and the cup as a picture of divine blessing and a picture of divine wrath. This is not being used here as a picture of divine wrath. It's being used as a picture of divine blessing. You see it in a psalm that we're going to take a look at next week, Psalm 23:5, where it says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Picture of blessing. Picture of joy in the presence of God. Very similar idea here. You are my chosen portion, my cup. You hold my life. You hold my future. You hold my lot in your hands, the ESV says, I believe. He's expressing trust that the Lord not only will provide for him, but will also deal with him fairly, according to his providence. And really, that's picture that I think we might have mentioned it in passing last week. This idea of a lot was how you petitioned. It was a picture of how they petitioned God. when they cast lots to determine who was going to replace Judas, it wasn't gambling to see who's going to be the next apostle. It was used as an oracle, and God would, through his providence, make his selection known through that process. In a sense, the apostolic future was in God's hands because he was choosing the replacement. That's a way that we can relate to this particular text here. David is expressing a willingness to commit his life into the capable hands of God. The New English translation renders this, "You hold my future," as "You make my future secure." And I argue that because God makes his future secure, it has a ripple effect throughout the rest of this particular psalm. And the imagery flows and reinforces the notion that you find right there in that pivot point. Now, verse 8, another picture of trust. "I constantly trust in the Lord, because he is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. I always let the Lord guide me," CSB. "Because he is at my right hand, I will not be shaken." Confidence from trusting in the Lord's strength rather than one's own. When somebody or something is at your right hand, the right hand is pictured as a symbol of power, a symbol of strength in that particular culture. It's also pictured as the place where someone who is standing with you to help you would be. God, in this sense, is pictured as David's strength, his helper, in the midst of whatever troubled times that he might be experiencing. The Lord is the one who counsels him. The Lord is the one who strengthens him. The Lord is the one who is at his right hand. And it's a beautiful picture. You see, the idea of, and it's not something that's haphazard. In fact, the word, "I have the Lord always set before me," is how it reads in the ESV. It's the idea, the word carries with it the idea of something being placed purposely in a location. The Lord is always set before me. I have put the Lord before me. Think of it, how many of you have ever been mountain climbing? Did you have to hammer in any little, or did they have those in place, the pittons?
They taught us how to do it.
So you had to hammer them in? Mm-hmm. Did you do that as you were on your way up? The very first thing, you would take a pitton and put it in place, hammer it in. After you connected to the rope from whoever had already gone up to the top before you, you'd hammer it in, and then you would be able to go and begin to ascend. These are purposely placed. Think of a guy who is climbing without all of the gear. You ever see one of these nuts that go out to these really tall, no offense if you're one of these nuts, but they go out to these mountains and they like hanging onto it with just they're just fingers, and they're just monkey grabbing the thing, and I'm like, what in the world? I think Tom Cruise likes to do that. I've seen him actually, he did that in a movie one time, and he does his own stunts. It's really an odd thing, but you're thinking about the next step, the pitton is before you. Your safe handhold, the secure thing is before you, and you trust that that is, because of its placement, because of its location, because of what it is, you trust that you will not fall, because that has been purposely placed. They place a pitton in front of them to give a firm grip and a secure hold so they don't fall. They trust in that spike. And the firm pitton that David places before him is the Lord, specifically the immutable law of God. And you see that spoken of in various places. The same word is used in Psalm 119:30. He will never be shaken or upended as a result. And then you have the most amazing part of this psalm, and it's the extent of the hope that David expresses due to his unshakable confidence as he looks to the future and he sees something remarkable, someone remarkable. Now, as we talked about last week, I wasn't quite ready to get into the extent of that. I want to go ahead and clearly say here and clarify what I didn't get a chance to clarify last week. And that is, Peter authoritatively ascribed this looking forward, that David looked forward, and what he saw was Jesus of Nazareth. And that ultimately settles the question of the ultimate meaning of that last strophe. Why? Because Peter spoke as he was led and directed by the Spirit of God. I don't think I was entirely clear last week when I was saying that. Now, what I say there is not the same as saying that David understood with complete certainty what he spoke. He spoke prophetically is beyond question according to Acts 2:30, who called David a prophet. What he saw with specificity and exactly is a matter of actual discussion. And we tend to picture these visions as being things that are perfectly clear, but Jesus himself will go on to say at various places, he said this, I tell you that many prophets and kings desired to hear what you see, desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. 1 Peter 1:10 through 12 says, concerning this salvation, the prophets who prophesied about the grace that was to be yours searched and inquired carefully, inquiring of the person of the time or the spirit in which the Spirit of Christ in them was indicating when he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the subsequent glories. The ultimate point that they're getting at here is, yes, they had a view of something that was to come, or someone that was to come, or a function that was to come, or a role that was to come, and it's going to change depending on the context and the text being referred to here. But that doesn't mean that they understood with specificity. If they understood, and there's a logical aspect to this, if they understood with specificity exactly what David is said to have seen here, and it was as clear as we tend to view it in our eyes, then there would be more conversions and less resistance from the Pharisees and the Jews post-resurrection who knew the expectations. But what did they do when they found the body was raised? When the guards went back and told the chief priests in Matthew 28:11 through 15 that, hey, the body's gone, what did they tell them to do? Don't say anything, and tell them that the disciples, his apostles, stole the body. And it goes on to say, so they took the money as they were directed, and this story has been spread among the Jews to this day. The day that, that Luke was writing this, at some point in the future. So, one of the things that we need to remember, there's no indication from known Jewish writings before the Acts account that the Jews viewed this passage as messianic. They just simply didn't necessarily understand what was being said here. Some evidence suggests that the Pharisees did use this passage as evidence of a resurrection, and they would use it in arguments against against the Sadducees, who rejected that particular idea, according to Howard Marshall and Carson and Beale and Gareth Reese and others like that. This has some implications for how we approach this text. Some have said that the entire thing is David writing in the voice of a future descendant. That's a hard argument to make, but I have seen that particular position put forward. Others only ascribe the part that Peter specifically quotes as referring to the Messiah to come. That's the position that my instructor at East Tennessee took, Tim Forlines. And there are others who hold the case that it may have had some fulfillment, and David looked forward to his descendants continuing on the throne in perpetuity and found strength in that, but there is a greater, as a deliverance from current danger, And that is a greater fulfillment in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ from the grave, not suffering corruption and things of that nature. Now, you're going to find a spectrum across the brotherhood on how that's dealt with. I've already given you two different positions within the brotherhood, and the third one is also held by Eddie Clower in the Truth for Today series. He says this: perhaps as David writes these words, he's thinking of the glorious life that he has with God, the undisturbed peace he has in this life, and the assurance that God will provide an even greater walk with him in the life to come. Even if David is thinking this way when he writes this passage, the Holy Spirit has much more in mind. David may be writing an expression of trust in God for the indefinite future, but the Holy Spirit is uttering through him a poetic portrayal of the greatest event of all time. So we end up struggling with the problems that we have in this text. Do we deal with it as an Old Testament psalm first and foremost? Or do we jump? I mean, we're not studying the book of Acts, we're studying the book of Psalms. So we have to, yes, know how the ultimate usage of it is, but we have to understand how this would fit in David's flow of thought. And that strictly and only refers to something in the future. Maybe he's finding comfort in the fact that his line won't be destroyed, even though he might find himself in a difficult situation. God will preserve him in his line. You know, that could be an expression of confidence that is both shocking because it looks beyond the norm and whatever. But the fact is, we have to understand how this, and ask the question, how does this fit in with the flow of thought that David is expressing, knowing that David did look forward and see, but we don't know, and maybe we don't know exactly what he saw. We know later on that it is attributed that he saw this, and that is 100% according to the Spirit of God. I'm not doubting that at all. That is not what I'm doing. I'm saying that oftentimes the Hebrews used Scripture and quoted Scriptures in ways that we're generally not familiar with or would find unusual. So there is a struggle to be had there. I follow the latter position. I know many good people who follow the middle position. I know others who follow the first position that I mentioned. And this tension can impact the way that we outline these particular strophes. But what we need to remember is Peter, through the Spirit, revealed the fullest expression of the confidence David expresses in the trust that Jesus ultimately had in the Father through his great power who would raise him from the grave. And it finds its ultimate fullness in the resurrection of Christ, and that is undeniable. And the ultimate meaning of this passage as it's cited in the New Testament. So, it's a critical, the resurrection was a critical piece of his identity as Messiah. I'm going to have to end there. Sorry about going late, but not sorry I hadn't had to do it. And next week, we're going to take a look at this homework here, which is Psalm 23, the Shepherd's Song. So feel free to look at that, and we'll go on from there. Thank you.
I'm doing it next week.
Okay, of course you will.
Just kidding.
Okay, We need to do this.
Hey, Mom, you never had trash for a while.
Now, should I go? Like the, remember that? Bad. Yeah, they have it all the
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. I hope everybody had a wonderful first day to a new year. Do have a few announcements. I guess first of all, do remember, please grab a bulletin. We do have an extensive prayer list, and remember all these people that are listed in there. There's a lot that are battling cancer. There's a lot of different things here, but just be sure to keep one of those handy when you're saying your prayers. A couple of updates. One update. First of all, Belle Alexander, we had announced, was having a CT scan, and got good news on that. The preliminary reports on the CT scans show no signs of cancer or any issues like that. They do think it's just a pancreatic insufficiency, so they're going to treat that. So there's two parts to this. That's great news there. The other news was she was approved for the lower cost medication. The higher cost was going to be $7,000 or $8,000 a month, and she was approved for that. So they're excited about that. So Belle, I think everything, they got about the best they could get out of that. They got some direction on that and ruled out a lot of things. So we want to remember to keep Belle in our prayers as she goes through this. Also, Chris Smith is at home. He's got bronchitis, so remember Chris Smith. And also Susan Smith is having an MRI tomorrow. They're trying to figure out she's having migraines, and they've tried several things, so they're going to do an MRI trying to get to the cause of what's going on with Susan. So they've asked for prayers of the congregation, so remember both of them. Darren Clayton is sick this week as well. And then also, as we mentioned Sunday, we want to remember Joyce's cousin, Wanda, who's Joyce's cousin, who's in hospital with a brain bleed, wasn't it? Yeah, brain bleed. Just remember her. It was very serious, and just remember her. Also, it was mentioned Matt Phillips' former boss's girlfriend's daughter is having seizures, and So remember her also. So a couple of things. Let's see, upcoming events. We've got January the 6th will be the outreach group at 9 a.m. here at the building. Then January the 13th, the ladies class will meet in the annex. Also this week, Ben Phillips and the group will be leaving Saturday. They're leaving Saturday for Costa Rica, so remember them in your prayers that they'll have safe travels. It's a good thing. My Joy said she's pretty nervous. The travel's not fun for her, so I'm sure that'll be a great trip. I'm sure it'll be a productive one, but keep them in your prayers and as they're on this trip. So it was 8 days this time. I think it was. Get back the 13th. So also another thing for the Phillips, Matt Phillips starts his classes. I think he starts Monday. I'm right on it. He starts this Monday. They haven't relocated yet. They're still living here, but and will be driving. But he does start at the North Carolina School of Biblical Studies over in Winston, over at Warner's Chapel on Monday. So remember, Matt, this is a huge week for him, and it's a great thing that he's doing. And we know he'll do great. I'm sure he will. But want to remember them in our prayers. They've got a lot going on. It's very stressful for him. I know he told me last week it was his last day of his job, so it was real now. It's happening, and so it's a big time for them. So remember them in your prayers. I think that is everything. The only other thing, just don't forget the sign-up sheet in the annex for anyone about the communion trays and the bags, or the communion tray in the back, and then the bags. For next year, there's a sign-up sheet in the back. I did not look at that, so I don't know what months are still available. It's out of June, August, or December if there's some available. So remember to look at that. Landon is going to June and December. Landon said June and December are still available. So, all right, thank you. And Landon is going to lead us for our songs this evening. The first song will be 395. 395.
You want to go ahead and mark the song invitation. Will be song number 29. Song number 29 will be the song of invitation. Song number 395 will be the song we'll sing before the invitation. 395. There are no stained glass windows in the temple of my heart. No chiming bells remind me when to pray. But there the Savior meets me, and of all the
Well, we all know the golden rule. You've heard it probably most of your life. Here it is in a way in which you've probably never seen it before, graphically presented, but it simply says in the ESV, "So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets." It's a regulative principle. It is designed to cause the person with a heart trained by the Lord, and that's the critical part here, because some people are like, well, I don't really, well, you have to have a godly heart for this principle to work as intended. So a person whose heart's trained by the Lord will consider the impact of any potential action on another, viewing it first through the lens of how this impacts someone else, how I would like, whether this is something that I would like to have happen to me, the lens of self in that sense. If we don't like it, then if we don't want it done to us, then we shouldn't do it to others. That can take a lot of different forms. That's simply what it gets right down to it. It's easy to remember, it's prescriptive, and it's introspective because it causes us to look at our own, things that we like. It's easy to just lash out and do something against someone else, but when you stop and ask, oh, well, would I really like that to happen to me? You begin to see the depth of this particular instruction here. When we hear this, though, we often think in terms of physical action. Doing evokes the idea of action, doing something. But it's easy to forget that our speech is every bit as much an act, a verbal act, and is something that should also be regulated by the golden rule. Not simply actions as in, oh, you need a book? Here, take a book. That's nice. I want somebody to help me that way. Our speech is also subject to this. In philosophical terms, speech is viewed as an act. Speech acts. Because they have intention, they have purpose, they have effect. And they can be just as effective as the message that a pitcher sends to a guy hugging the plate, and you throw that high and tight fastball just about right here off the chin, telling them, hey, you need to get back a little bit, that's my plate. That sends a message, that communicates something. There's a purpose behind that. The same thing with our own speech as well. Not only does it have the power to hurt others, to cause pain, and to lift up, our speech reveals the quality of our hearts as well. Interesting, though, how many are willing to admit if you've been in a physical altercation in your life? I'm sitting here telling you, I've been in physical altercations before. I wasn't always a Christian. But the fact of the matter is, what I find interesting, and we were going to the Charlotte game. We were going to see the Bulls. Charlotte happened to be there. Bulls won, by the way. And anyway, we saw a woman beating on a man as we were pulling into the parking garage. And my son was like, don't look. I'm like, are you kidding? That's terrifying. There's a sermon illustration here. So I'm like, they were fighting. There was like people coming in to break it up. I don't know what the deal was. And it's a reminder, generally speaking, only 2 or 3 people raise their hands when it comes to talk about altercations, physical altercations. Because we are far more reluctant to hurt someone with our fists, but how many people have said something that hurts with their mouth? What makes this less acceptable than punching someone with your speech? Hurtful words and things of that nature. I want to offer you a New Year's resolution for 2025. How about we resolve to be more golden in our speech as we move forward this year? It's an area, it's an area that every Christian looking at me and the Christian looking at you needs to work on. every day striving to be more like Jesus in our speech, because there are times where our mouth gets the best of us. If you ever read James, you know chapter 3 has something to say about that. Now, ask yourself these questions before, when you feel the need to unload on somebody this year. Would Jesus say this? That sounds so cliche because of the bands and stuff. Ultimately, that's the deciding factor for us, right? Would Jesus actually do this? If not, why are you flapping your jaws? Don't do it. Find another way. Ask yourself, what are my motives for saying this? Why do I want to say this? And would Jesus approve of those motives? Ask yourself, does this, what I want to say, truly glorify the Lord and demonstrate love for my neighbor? Would I want my neighbor to say what I am fixing to say to them to me? Ask yourself, ultimately, how does this meet the golden rule? It reminds us not to take callous liberties with our words, not to speak to others in ways that are inappropriate. It's a way of moderating who we are and how we respond, sometimes to negative things that we encounter. We respond and bring glory to Christ. We respond because we wouldn't want someone to respond to us in that way. And we can all be a little bit more golden. I'll leave you with this passage in Proverbs 12:18. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. I don't know about you. I'd always prefer to be on the healing end rather than the getting stabbed with the sword of someone's mouth, if you know what I mean. So let's think about that as we go about our speech this year and resolve to be more golden in our speech. We're going to offer song of encouragement. I don't know what your needs are, but if we can pray with you, if we can study with you, you can come and make that known as we stand and sing.
All to Jesus I surrender. Billy, will you close us out in prayer?
Holy Father, we humbly come before you, praise you in great name. We thank you so much for another day. We thank you for another year, and we pray we can live up to what your word teaches us, that we can live each day for you, and we can make a new start, and we can just always follow the example that your son gave us. And we just praise you, and we thank you for all that you do for us. We pray with all those that are needing healing, and there's so many, and we thank you for that. We thank you for the avenue of prayer that we can come to you. We thank you for hearing our prayers. We thank you for listening to them. We thank you for answering them. And we pray for healing and for so many people, and comfort, peace, and just pray for safety as we live. Keep us safe and in your care. Just pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
I don't want you to. I just don't want to lie. He's trying to tickle me. Wait, are you ticklish? Why don't you mess around and find out? Hey, I'm about to raise my hand and say yes, I have.